Hey guys, Joe Leeming here, and this is my 78 Trans Am. So I'm going to start off by saying, many of you are not going to believe me here, but this was my first car. I bought this car when I was 14 years old with the help of my father, who gave me a generous loan of $1,500. And this was not the first car I found. For about 6 months, I was glued to Craigslist ads, looking at cars in that price range that were somewhat drivers. And they range from an 87 Monte Carlo SS, which I liked, to a Series 1 Land Rover that was really just rotted to crap, and I'm very happy I didn't end up buying that. But then in April, at a local swap meet at the Stafford Motor Speedway, this car caught my eye. And no, it didn't look like this. Not even close. But as a 14-year-old, I could somehow see through all the rust in the 20-year-old primer to visualize what the car looks like today. I'll describe to you guys a little bit of what it looked like upon arrival to my house. It was a dark gray graphite colored primer, pretty much covered in that. And this primer was probably 20 years old, and it would actually wipe off with your fingers when you rubbed it. And the first thing I did was see a couple hints of the original bird that was hidden under the primer. So I went about to sand down the hood where the bird would have been and actually unearthed the bird. And it stayed like this for a couple weeks, because really this car was built in stages. Initially when I bought it, I was going to just right away just make it roadworthy, drive it as a beater, and just enjoy it, you know. I was almost in high school, and I just wanted a car. But to most people that know me, things go a little out of hand, and I can't settle for something that's rough. I have to make it the best it could be. And that's what I brought this car to. The best it could be. So the first 2 years really became a journey to find parts. And as this build was going on, Trans Ams were getting more and more popular and more expensive to restore. And 2 years into the restoration, I was really just going forwards and backwards. Nothing was really getting done. I was just spray painting random panels just to make it look somewhat better, but in reality, those would just get sanded down again. Until another time visiting the Stafford Motor Speedway swap meet, I think it was in fall, I found a 1980 Trans Am WS4, had the drums in the back, so it wasn't a WS6, black and gold T-top car that was crushed in a barn collapse. And this car, apart from being crushed by the barn, was mint. There was no rust on the car at all. Had an extremely low mileage engine, 60,000 miles for the age. That's pretty darn good. And it had all the larger sway bars, the better wheels, better tires, better interior components, which most of the interior when I got this car was pretty much trashed. Apart from the carpet, there was a new carpet in this car, believe it or not, which is staying in it, which is still in it today. But this 1980 Trans Am was a godsend. Guy was looking for 2,500 for it, which for a crush car, you would think, wow, that's way too pricey. But really, in the realm of Trans Ams, there were so many parts to offer from this car, and everything that was still good on that car was bad on this car, and it just worked out really, really well. And that's really the deciding factor that told me, hey, I could make this car really nice with a lot of work. I have the parts, I have the drivetrain. Let's just go with it. Let's do this. So really the first thing to tackle was the bit of rust repair I had to do. So the first thing I did was pull the car apart really down to nothing. It was a shell with the rear end just to allow it to roll around with the aid of the tractor. And I went about fixing some of the floors, patching a couple spots. They weren't too bad. Of course, the back panel behind the back bumper had some rot on the bottom. Every Trans Am guy knows that one area that rots out. But all in all, the cowl was beautiful on this car. The roof was, it had some surface rust on the top. Wasn't bad. There was some rust, surface rust, I might add, that was sprouting out right behind, right alongside the wraparound back window where a lot of them collect pine needles and such, and the rust starts to work under the paint and then travel all the way down. So this hadn't rotted, it was just bubbling and some surface rust was popping up. The dog legs were pretty rough around the fenders. The metal was somewhat delaminating where the pinch welds were. But this 1980 parts car had original Pontiac sheet metal that I could just cut off and replace, and I didn't have to deal with ill-fitting reproduction parts that are a pain in the ass, as everyone knows. This was really before AMD had really taken off and offered a lot more, which I've bought some of their parts for other projects, and I have nothing but good things to say about them. They are a little pricey though, but for good reason. And the funny thing about this Crush Trans Am was it ran and drove, and I wish I had the video. I cannot find it, but I do have a video of doing just an enormous burnout in it, because it was a posi rear end with 411 gears in the back, so that thing just smoked them up right away. And those 411s did work their way to power the rear wheels here. So yeah, this car does pretty good burnouts too, once it's warmed up. So really this car really started taking off with a restoration, and I was very committed to doing everything on it. And I want to say it was junior year, and the local vocational high school, Bay Path Regional Vocational High School, to people in this area, they know it, in Charlton, they offer a night course for auto body, and I knew the instructor, and my dad and I decided to take the night course just for a fun thing, just to learn a little bit as I was working on this car. It's always good to hear from an actual expert rather than making your own mistakes and learning from those. In this class, I want to say it ran for 2.5, 3 months. Every Tuesday night, I do believe it was. It was a long time ago. It's hard to remember. Towards the end of the class, you were allowed to bring in your own project. And by the end of that course, this car was ready for primer and paint. As the class went along, I learned little things about bodywork, and right after the class, I transitioned right to the car and did what I learned. And is the car perfect? No. There's kind of a reason I painted it white. It does look good white too. But, there's definitely some ripples. But for my first car, I think it's pretty damn good. especially with these F bodies, they do have some long straight runs of metal. Sorry, there's cat paw prints all over this. Damn cats. There's a little ripple there. That's okay though. But this car, it's a great 15-footer. It looks mint from that direction, but you know, more zoom into the cat paw right there. I can just tell by the size exactly which cat it was. That's okay though. They're good. They're cool cats. When the instructor told us about this 2 weeks of bring your own project, I took that a little bit literal and brought the whole car. And he was just the coolest guy in the world, and he actually let me prime this car and paint this car in the vocational school paint booth, which I owe so much to this quality of restoration, to that nice gesture he made to me. And the paint really came out great. And it was such a cool experience to get all suited up, the spray gun. He taught me how to mix the paint, which I've kind of forgotten after a while how he did it. And then he did actually give me another week to get all the urethane components, like the nose cone, those fender flares, the air dam, the spoiler, compile those into the booth and paint those. And a funny story with that is I was all ready to paint, and I had just started to put a tack coat on the spoilers, and he busted in and started yelling, saying, "Don't forget the flex agent, don't forget the flex agent." And if I had forgotten that flex agent, the paint on these parts would be all cracked up, and we had both forgotten about that because we were just too eager to paint. And that would have been a big mistake. That would have been a lot of work to fix. But I'm 24 years old now, so how old is this paint? This paint is 7 years old, and there is not a crack. There is a crack on the back bumper where I may have not been paying attention and backed up into a sign. But it was just a tiny little spider crack, nothing big. I did panic though that day. Yeah, I won't tell that story. That was just one of those prom night ordeals everyone goes through. So once the car was painted, I began really prepping for the decals, and I went with the Phoenix Graphics decal set and opted instead of paying the larger amount for the molded in pinstripes. I wanted to try my luck with the roll of gold pinstriping, and I actually really, really enjoyed laying it all out. It was just so fun to follow the contours of the car and curve this pinstripe around how it would be from factory. And you know, there's definitely some ripples. You can definitely tell the space in the middle. It does sway around a little bit, but I think it was worth the savings of $200. You know, again, I was a junior in high school. I didn't have a lot of money, and I don't like to ask my father for money, even though he would have gladly given me it. The only thing on this car I did seek some help to do was putting the bird on. My dad has an 81 Turbo Trans Am that has an even bigger bird than this, and it's just we learned that this is not a one-person job. Someone has to stay at the tip of it, and someone has to hold the two wings. And the trick is you line up the tip with the crease of the hood, you line up the head with the crease of the hood, lay the center part over, and then work the wings out both ways. And it's never failed us. We've done Well, I think we've only done this one and the one on the 81. So some little custom touches I did here and there. I had this from the 80, which is actually a special edition gold Pontiac Arrowhead emblem, which this car isn't a special edition. I'm not going to lie to you about that. But I really liked how the gold emblem paired with all the gold accents throughout the rest, because this is actually a special edition stripe kit as well. So another little custom touch I did was, upon finding this car, the shaker was already cut out, which was an old school custom mod a lot of people did with these, because looking at just a ridged plastic backing on this really kind of made you a little bit depressed that, yeah, this shaker's just for looks, which it kind of is. So a lot of people cut the backs off to give it some sort of functionality of cooling. So before, this was just open air. And if I can get you closer, not sure if I can get you. You can see there is a screen in there now. And that's actually made out of an old air cleaner that I cut the little venting off the side and flattened it and urethaned it to the inside of the shaker. And of course, I painted it gold so it matches the rest. Just the little finishing details here and there that really kind of brings a car to the next level. Another mod, obviously to pay homage to the movie Smokey and the Bandit, does have CB radio that does turn on. I don't have the antenna hooked up, so its functionality is pretty much null. But it's all about the looks here. And I can always pick the little microphone up and pretend I'm talking to truckers. And that CB antenna, though not hooked up, is resting on the trunk where it should be. Another mod on these that most people do is get rid of the single exhaust, because I can't do the merge into one and then merge back out into dual exhaust, which is just seems like a bunch of overkill for nothing. So it is running true dual exhaust with Flowmaster 40s. So it has a really nice rumble, but not too overpronounced. I think another thing that really sets this car off is the WS6 style wheels, which are the WS6 width. So this car handles very nicely. And these were off a car we bought, which we're pretty heavily into Trans Ams, so we had, well, we still have it. We have an 81 Daytona 500 Pace Car Edition that we bought with these wheels, and people who know Trans Ams know those should have a special turbo wheel on them, not these snowflakes. So I begged my dad for these wheels, and he gave them to me once he bought turbo wheels for that other car. So I think these really set it off, and a lot of people say I should be true to the special edition and paint the insets of the snowflake gold, but I think the white just makes it look so clean and very classy. I think painting it gold inside is just going to be a bit too tacky, and it's just going to be too much going on. I think the the body matched color is definitely the way I want to keep it for now. We'll see how I feel in a year. So once the decals were done, this car was on its way to being finished. Just needed a bit of interior work and The 80 parts car was unfortunately a tan interior, so I did utilize the beloved vinyl black paint, which I really thought was going to be crap, but again, it's been here for 7 years, and I always have my arm up on top of that door when I'm driving it, and it has not worn through at all. So let me get you into the interior a little bit more here. It is not perfect by any means, but it is definitely a driver quality. It's comfortable to drive in. It smells pretty good because of the newer seat covers I got, which they weren't the best, but again, it was the first time upholstering seats, and yeah, there's some wrinkles. I could blame it on the quality of the product, but it was kind of my fault. I did rush through it. But I did run it with cheap Walmart seat covers for about 4 years, so it was finally time to upgrade and really do it right. The back seat, believe it or not, is original to this car. This did not come from the 80. So this was the original back seat here. Original sail panels and such. I replaced the package tray, replaced the headliner, and I did the cheap option of putting a dash pad on it because I cannot find an affordable dashboard that's not destroyed. And especially now with these cars so hot, I'm probably going to be sticking with the dash pad, and I'm totally okay with that. But all the hard work really paid off with this car, and I had it ready for my senior year in high school. And I drove it through the nice months of the year. I didn't drive it through winter. And just the expressions and the reactions of the other students when I drove up in this was just it was hilarious. I live in a pretty rural area, so you have the group that's into the lifted trucks. You have the group that's into the 10-year-old Audis and Mercedes that are lowered and have an exhaust on them. And I was kind of by myself here. I just drove up in this and really stole the show. But as a senior, I put this car through the paces. Brought it to prom. Brought it to graduation. I did do a little burnout. Wasn't caught, luckily. My brother was much more unlucky in his car. But I've always been the type that gets away with a lot. Brought this to probably 100 shows within like the first 2 years of driving around. I just had such a blast. Went on my first date with it. It's followed me through every teenage experience I had, and it's just a big part of my life, this car. And it's really hurt me a lot that being in architecture school for the past 5 years, finally graduated, which I'm thrilled about. This car's really just sat idle in the garage, and I think it's a real sin that it's been sitting around. I just washed it the other day, and the amount of dust that was on it, it was like, wow, I'm really putting this car to shame, and I really need to get this car back on the road again. Everyone knows that, you go to school, things just occupy your time. You're not rich by any means. You're pretty much broke all the time. So little things break on this, and you're like, well, I'll just drive my other car. And one thing leads to another, and you realize, wow, that car's been sitting there for a good year. And it's like, wow, I have to get going on this thing. I can't let this car sit. So this summer, she's back on the road. I don't care what it takes. Let me pop the hood on this real quick. Show you guys the engine. Let me see if I can do this one-handed. I don't think I'm gonna be able to. Alright guys, I set you down. Let's go for it. There we go. Again, it's driver quality. It's not a trailer queen. I painted it way back when the engine was out, but I've put a good amount of miles on it, so the paint does burn off after a while. You know, there's some things I decided to forget about, so that little access hole right there is where the heater unit would go, which I have one, but I just haven't installed it yet. I mean, I don't drive this car in winter, so typically I don't really need heat. So guys, I'm sorry if I seem very tired. I am very tired. And this is the second video I've filmed tonight. Looking at 2 revivals I've done so far in my lifetime, and I'm hoping for many more. Again, I'm always into cars. I'm always thinking about cars, and I plan on having a hell of a lot of them, and hopefully working up the chain to some really big dollar things. You know, I really look to people like Wayne Carini as an inspiration, and if someday I could have a shop like his where I'm chasing cars and learning different stories and finding cars for other people, that would just be my dream job. I'm not complaining about what I do right now, but everyone has an aspiration, and one day hopefully I'll be there. But I hope you enjoyed my story about this Trans Am as well as my other Triumph. And I would love, since I'm now out of school and I have some time, I'd love to do a walk around and little storytelling about all the cars my family has. We have a hell of a lot, and I'm itching to get some of them out onto the internet and see how people react and see what people think. And maybe it'll help a little bit with networking and meeting new people. Because I don't know about you guys, but I'm very sick of this COVID. I'm very sick of there not being any swap meets or car shows. It is really just a killer of my social life, because that was my social life, was car shows, swap meets, selling things, buying things, mostly buying things. And I'm just eager for things to be back to the way they were and start enjoying these cars again. Alright guys, take care, and hope to hear from you all soon in future videos.
78 Trans Am. I think that's a 72 Dodge Charger. Man, that's early 70s, isn't it? They have vinyl top, laser stripe. Probably comes with a disco ball inside. You should be like playing Staying Alive on the way down. Firebird 1747 for the Charger.